Hi everyone, welcome to our second masterclass in our Building a Subscription series. I see that you are all filtering in now. The numbers are steadily going up. Just for those of you that didn't join our first masterclass, I'm Jazz from Manifesto, joining you from a relatively sunny Brooklyn, New York, and I've of course got some other guests today as well. Just before we get cracking, and as everyone continues to join, I've just got a couple of housekeeping things. We practice what we preach, and we are very much iterating the experience for you as attendees from masterclass to masterclass. So this masterclass is a bit different to the previous one. There's still no cameras today, so don't worry if you're in your gym wear. But this time we have enabled the chat, and we would love you to use it. We want questions throughout. It will be interactive this session. And so please do use the chat for questions. If you have any logistics problems, you can't hear us, you can't see us, you don't want to see us anymore, if you could also pop them in the chat. Kim, who is on with me, and I will be filtering through the chat. We'd also love you to interact with each other in the chat. Feel free to respond to each other's questions if you see anything interesting to you or want to echo anything. My job throughout today will be, or this morning will be, to filter your questions and get them back to our panelists and host. So with that, I'm going to start on the content. So we're here for Masterclass 2. It's about how to plan around customer engagement. Just before we get to our eagerly awaited guests, I'm just going to tell you a bit more about engagement and what it means to us at Manifesto. So Kim, if you wouldn't mind flicking to the first slide. I think for most of you, engagement won't be a new concept. It's been around in media and publishing for a while. It's traditionally focused on metrics around readership and content. However, we believe that engagement can have a much wider purpose across your business in how you deliver the success of products and experiences and how you drive customer value. Right now, it's in particular an important metric or way of thinking in the COVID environment that we live in. A lot of businesses are seeing success in acquisition of new subscribers, and really the question is going to come in how you keep those people, keep them sticky, and keep them after this event. So it's a very topical discussion for a lot of you. Engagement is a leading indicator of how customers behave and what value you can take from the relationship with you, and where along the relationship you can monetize that value. And it should be considered as a leading metric across the whole organization, a common way of driving total customer value across teams and services. So what does that mean in practice for your customers? Kim, if you wouldn't mind flicking to the next slide. Engagement is something to think about across the journey. So as I talked about previously, it was very prevalent in the grow and reactivate sections of customer journeys previously, but we think we should be thinking about it across the journey. I'm not going to dwell on this too long because I know our panelists, particularly Carl, have a lot to say about how you can use engagement up front in the attract and convert part of the journey, and I know you'd rather hear from them than a consultant. So I will leave that to the panelists, and hopefully that's whet your appetite a bit about thinking about engagement across the customer journey. And sorry, if we could just flip to the next slide. But in delivering across customer journey engagement, you have to think differently within your organization. And really this is about bringing teams together with a single common goal of engagement. So editorial thinking about content, yes, but marketing thinking about messaging, not just at acquisition, but retention and activation, product, creating experiences that keep people engaged and keep it easy for them to engage. And of course, tech and data being available to measure, evaluate, and iterate around engagement. So what does that mean in terms of how you work as a business? My final slide, Kim, is just what it means for your business. Really, thinking engagement at a business level and across business level is about reframing the metrics, consistent KPIs that bring together data from across teams and departments. This means you need to think differently about roles and responsibilities and might need to consider cross-functional roles that collate data, collect and think about whole customer experience. There might be execution capabilities you also need to think about differently, or acquire, build, grow, that allow you to measure and monitor engagement. And of course, it demands a different way of working where engagement and usage habits are at the heart of the entire business. So that's a very whistle-stop tour about how we think of engagement as both customer and commercial value and connecting across every stage of the journey. There are a lot of factors in there, from metrics, ways of working, organizational structures, business models, all sorts of things. And that's what we're going to start talking about today in our first of a series of webinars about engagement. With that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Nick, who is going to introduce the panelists and delve into engagement a bit more.
Hi, I'm Nick Smith. I'm one of the founding partners of Manifesto Growth Architects, and I'm delighted to welcome today Carl and Matt. Carl from Dow Jones, where he's the general manager for the subscription businesses across Wall Street Journal, Barron's, and MarketWatch. Carl moved to New York 5 years ago after working at News UK for a number of years within the subscription functions at the Times, the Sunday Times, and the Sun. Carl's responsible for subscription volume and revenue growth across Dow Jones's titles, where the flagship Wall Street Journal has reached 3 million subscribers. Carl lives in New York, although he's currently in the Hamptons, with his wife and young son, Samuel. Welcome, Carl. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Nick.
Matt, give us a wave. Matt joined the Archant Group as Chief Content Officer in November 2015. The Archant Group, for those who don't know, own more than 130 regional newspapers and magazines in the UK. Matt's career spans over 20 years in Fleet Street, plus some international consultancy roles with major news groups across the globe, including Argentina and Croatia. Matt has a track record of establishing new digital brands, including the first mirror.co.uk website, Mirror Football, and 3am. Somewhat counterintuitively, in 2016, Matt launched the anti-Brexit print publication, The New European. It was just a 4-week pop-up, wasn't it, Matt? But it's still running, it's still printing weekly, it's profitable, and it's got a growing and significant digital audience. And you'll find out in a moment that Matt is a proud Scouser. So today we're going to have a conversation. I'm just going to try and prompt the guys to tell you their stories. This isn't a teach-in, but it's very much a how-to, learning from the experience of two esteemed practitioners who've been on a journey. And I think that's the key point. So can we start there with you, Carl, perhaps? Wall Street Journal has been on a journey for some years towards creating value out of audiences. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the lessons you've learned in that journey, some of the stuff that you've experienced? Kicking off with you, Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and nice to, well, I can't see you, but you can see into my bedroom, so I'm good to join virtually. Yeah, the journey at the Wall Street Journal and at Dow Jones has been one that we've been through a kind of huge period of transformation over the last 5 years. We were, I'd say, very much a kind of print focused team 5 years ago. We were called the circulation department, which just has so many obviously connotations of circulating newspapers to people, and yeah, five years ago, our CEO, Will Lewis, basically said, no, this isn't our future. Our future is going to be within digital subscriptions, and set a goal of 3 million subscribers across Dow Jones over the kind of coming four years, and that set us on a path, I guess. It gave us a North Star. The North Star was that, you know, we had to stop doing things and start doing new things in order to become a member-first subscription business. And I think probably a number of lessons learned along the way. I think the headline would probably be that structure really matters, and how we organised ourselves really mattered. And we always think about how do we organise ourselves around the customer and the customer journey, and that's kind of how the team was built out over time. I think we originally we talk about it as the membership bow tie, so the point of conversion in the middle, you know, the top of the funnel to the left, and then a save at the right hand side. And we almost kind of built from the middle outwards. So, you know, we were conscious of not spending money on marketing if we were really bad at converting people. So there was a lot of work done within pricing, offers. The biggest piece of work was around our paywall. And I think we became more sophisticated in selling. And then over the last kind of 18 months is where we've really kind of been focusing on our sophistication within engagement and retention.
Thanks, Carl. Just before I go to Matt, there's a couple of supplementary things that are bouncing around in my head. it's often true of every organisation, but particularly news organisations. They often start with well, what's the structure look like, rather than, as you said, what's the North Star. You suggested that it came from Will Lewis, the CEO at the time. Was it a designated top-down, or how did you go through the process of coming up with a North Star? And what was it? Can you encapsulate it? Is there a set of words?
Yeah, I mean, the mission kind of came with also, the goal came with a mission and a purpose. So the goal told us, what we needed to get to, and the mission and the purpose told us how we get there. And really the filter to which we put strategic conversations through was that we wanted to become a member first business, and membership was the filter. So, should we be putting copies of the newspaper in questionable places when we're a membership business? Probably not. Should we have a sales channel that bugs people on the phone through an outbound sales conversation as a membership business? No, we probably shouldn't. So there were, the filter of membership basically gave us a lens to understand, well, what things should we stop? And I think that was most important, actually. It was starting with what should we stop, to provide the bandwidth to then work out what we should start. Very
good, thank you. Matt, I guess the challenges are very different in local news, but I know from our conversations in the past that connection to community really matters to you. Can you talk a bit about the journey that Archant and you've been on? And particularly I'm interested in a post-COVID. Maybe that's a supplementary question, but perhaps you share your thoughts.
I think, COVID's a very interesting topic in its own right, and probably we should both speak about how that might have accelerated a lot of the things we plan to do. But I've always had a sort of allergy to huge audiences, because I've always worked on the basis that the bigger the audience, the harder it is to really serve people in a way that is meaningful to them. And I think a lot of the time that we were on national press in London, we were seeking scale over at any cost. Scale, in fact, even to the degree where we were buying scale from third parties. We were buying audiences in to supply traffic to advertising partners. And it occurs to me that scale, it's a market nonsense, because the bigger the inventory on the online gets, the cheaper the price of advertising, and you're only left with one option, which is to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Whereas if you can do the reverse, which is not worry so much about the mass scale, but worry about the depth of engagement that you achieve with people who are completely aligned and passionate about what you are offering. And if you can actually go further than that and can make them see you as the framework of their community. So not some satellite objectively reporting on a community, but something that is part of a community, influences a community, and has a constructive approach to making that community better. If you can do all of those things, then not only will you be able to charge people directly for access to what you do, they will willingly, happily fund what you're doing, because they will see that as their price of being part of that community. And I think local media, I think local media traditionally has had a bit of a self-esteem problem. And 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when they were thinking about what do we do online, they didn't have millions of pounds like the Guardian, the BBC, and the New York Times, and the Telegraph to experiment, but they knew that they did. So they looked at what the Telegraph and the BBC and the Guardian did, and they followed it and they mimicked it. And that's why you go to a local newspaper website, and basically it's the same as a national newspaper website. And yet the two models, the commercial models underpinning them and the emotions driving those audiences, could not be more different. And I've always thought that the opportunity in local should be the most lucrative space in media. You've got pretty much a geographical domination by definition. You've got content only you can have because you've got people on the ground there. And you've got an audience that should be really receptive to your evangelizing and championing of their community. And yet as everybody knows, local media is the most existentially challenged sector of our industry. So what are we're getting something fundamentally wrong. And what I've been trying to do over the last few years, several years, decade now, is get people to take a step back and think about something beyond the traditional engagement metrics. And it's something that I think we don't think about it because we can't count it. And it's an emotional engagement. And I think in our search for scale, we sacrificed a lot of an emotional engagement that audiences used to have with our print products. And we have got to find a way of reclaiming that, because unless somebody feels emotionally invested in what you're doing, I do not believe you can survive. You can possibly survive. I don't believe there's a commercial model that makes any sense to that going forward. Maybe Mail Online has got enough huge scale to dominate a kind of free to market business model, but even they are, really challenged in making that work. So emotional engagement is my mantra.
That's a brilliant segue for into the world of metrics. For us, the difference between subscription and membership is engagement. But how do you measure it? What are the key metrics of engagement, and do they change at different points of a customer's relationship with you? And how do you demonstrate the commercial value from engagement? Because it was in the old days, engagement was a soft brand thing, not a commercial hard metric. So, what are the things that really matter now? What should we measure? What are the KPIs we're driving? What's leading? What's lagging? Lots of questions there, Carl. Perhaps you can start with some of your perspectives.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I'll try and unpack some of that with experiences that we've had. I think first and foremost, and on Jazz's slide, you kind of touched upon it. Engagement's a team sport. It's not something that you're going to achieve just by having a great sales and marketing department, right? You need sales and marketing, you need product, you need the newsroom, and that combination across those three areas are the most powerful way to do effective engagement. So again, I would probably come back to starting off with a universal goal. So and this is just a simple framework that we kind of started with that's just come up on screen, but starting with a universal goal that can translate across those different departments. And I think there's an art and a science to this. The science to this is to ensure that the goal actually, as a leading indicator, has an influence on the lagging indicator, which from our perspective, when I think about engagement of subscribers, the lagging indicator is retention. So what leading indicator has the biggest influence on retention, that can also translate into these other parts of the organization. And for us, it's about driving habit. So habit is the kind of core foundation of our engagement goal. The way we measure that is through active days. So what's the kind of return frequency of our subscriber base kind of within a 28-day period. Those things can kind of ladder down, and there's other engagement metrics that can influence it. But that's kind of the headline. And so the question really to us as a kind of three department dimension is how do we drive more habituation amongst our members? And I always harp on about the old days, but a newspaper, arguably before any social media kind of came on board, was probably one of the strongest habit loops that we had, right? The habit of either picking up the paper on the way through a station, or in the States having it thrown on your driveway. That was a strong habit loop. So that's our kind of belief anyway, is that we need to create strong habit loops within our digital ecosystems in order to drive active days. I always like to oversimplify things, because I think it helps especially when you're trying to bring lots of people within the organization along with you. So the other three kind of tenets that we think about when we set out our engagement framework is the who, the what, and the where. So the who was basically saying, well, we shouldn't treat everybody in our base the same. There's going to be some people in our base who are happy customers and some people that aren't. So, but we need to distinguish between the two, and that kind of leads to kind of more reactive engagement. But then also we also need to understand. We often use the language of kind of A grade student and C grade student. So what's the difference between the two? So when you segment your base, what is it about super users that make them super, and what is it about your occasional users that make them different? And put yourself into the shoes of those two audiences when we think about interventions. The what came out of the goal, right, which is that if habituation's the goal, then you've got to understand what habits within our products keep members happy. What are the features in our products that drive habituation? And then the third area, which without this you don't have an engagement plan, is that because if people don't come to your product, then you can do, this all kind of falls down, right? So it's ensuring that when they do come to your product, there is a canvas within your products that drive to a habit that is going to drive your ultimate goal. So having a product canvas to promote to new habits, or just to encourage consumption of an existing habit, becomes really, really important, especially from kind of a product and marketing perspective.
Got 100 things going through my head, Carl. Well, I need to get Matt engaged in this debate too. I'm going to return to, there's some questions in the chat I'm going to return to. So I'm going to do it in this order. Matt, in the old world, we measured circulation-driven revenues via cover price and display advertising revenue. Are they still important, or are other things more important, like lifetime value?
Well, they're certainly very important, because they're paying our way to hopefully a different model. But I think I don't think there's any debate around the fact that the existing display advertising model and circulation revenue model has a finite lifespan. I hope and pray newspapers in some form go on forever, but I'm not counting on them supplying the core revenues that make journalism possible. So we've got to find a bridge. Interestingly, Google came to us and also McClatchy in the States, and asked us and gave us a lot of money to try and rethink a sustainable model for digital news in a local community. And that really gave us, this is one of the problems, not having the bandwidth or the resource to get yourself out of the burning house, and to look for a new house. So this is called Project Neon, and we've launched our first of 3 sites, and we're taking a wholly different approach to try and, in many ways, talk about what Carl was talking about. I've never actually heard habit loop before, but I'm now going to adopt that as my core strategy.
I'm going to come back to habits in a moment.
But it is about habit, or rather, that's the sort of question I pose to my journalists: is why aren't they coming back 3, 4, 5 times a day, not 3, 4, 5 times a month even? Why are we not essential to the community in a way that other media are? And I think once you pose that question, then a lot of quite esoteric engagement pointers start mattering, like how many conversations do you engender in the community? How many inbound emails does the editor get about something you've written? How many petitioners can you get on an issue that you've decided is important? How many questions can you raise at a council meeting that are pursued and have a constructive outcome? So not just the old metrics around the stuff we can sell to advertisers, but the stuff that is probably much more deeply felt by the readers. And also, I just want to add that advertisers are also readers in a community. And I think that's a point that's often missed in local media in particular. We describe ourselves as the #1 media in the communities that we serve. And we are, right? In terms of having people there and the amount of content we produce. But when you analyze how many people from that community come to you on any given day, or what percentage of the SMEs in that community transact with you, it's pathetic. You know, I mean, I ask a journalist what they think those numbers are, and they'll tell me from 25% to 50% of the population of so-and-so a town will come to look at our website on any given day. And it's a total myth. It's low single digits, you know, 5, 6, 7%. And what is wrong with what we're doing, given all the advantages we've got in the market, that's all we can attract? You know, I think it's a complete failure of journalism. And I also think that the word journalism and the definition of journalism is a massive problem, especially for local newspaper people. I think we are turning lots and lots of kids out of media colleges with a very fixed idea of what qualifies as journalism, and not much of it is based in or grounded in the data that we're seeing, the real-time data that we're seeing from communities. Yeah. I mean, one very quick example just to close is to say, you know, if you ask any sports editor on a regional newspaper, go 5 years back, ask them if mixed martial arts was something we should be covering in the paper, they'd laugh at you and tell you it wasn't a real sport. Boxing's a real sport, but there are 10 times the number of mixed martial arts obsessives in our areas than there are boxing fans. So I think you can apply that thinking to an awful lot of what goes on in the newsroom. And we've got newsrooms that are full of journalists who think it's the reader that's wrong, not them. You know, it's the reader that's wrong because they don't appreciate what we're doing. And we've got to really ask ourselves, what are we there for, if that's the case?
We're leading into the questions around structure and delivery, but I just wanted to give Carl a chance just to talk about Inmar in the way that you've been working with Google on the local news initiative, Matt. Carl, you're working with Inmar on habits. Is there anything you want to share there before we talk about structures delivery?
Yeah, we've written a lot of blogs through the kind of Inmar portal, and yeah, I spoke at an engagement summit last year actually in Miami, which was lovely. And really, what we're trying to do is just to share some of the work we've been doing around habit, and more specifically what we call the Habit Project. And the Habit Project was at its heart was a data science project, where we started with the exam question of really simple, just said, well, if habituation is what we need to deliver, what is it within our products that currently deliver habituation and make our customers happy? So we took, I think there was over 100 different actions that you could take within our products. And we put that into some kind of modeling that used retention data to look at the impact of the habit on the likelihood of somebody staying. The time period that's really important is within people's first 4 weeks. So there's a chart actually, if you want to bring up, I'll just talk to it. But there was a kind of an insight that we got out of it, which was that the power of habit formation really is, if you don't get it on day 0, then you're going to start. It's going to get harder every day thereafter. So what this chart looks at is the likelihood of adopting a new habit and this is across our membership base. And it looks at people, their tenure going across the bottom. And this and basically what it's saying is that the longer you remain a member, the less likely it is that you're going to start doing something new. But what this did for us was to say, well, it's really, really important then that we understand, 1, what habits drive better retention, but 2, really focusing on from day 0 onwards on creating habit usage within our base. So the Habit Project really, in a nutshell, was almost like an engagement playbook. It gave us ranked over 100 different habits in our products, and the relative impact of each habit on the likelihood of someone remaining a customer if they were to take that habit in their first 4 weeks. It just gives then a bit of a framework to be thinking about, okay, where should we be spending money within our product? What features should we be spending money on within our product? And also from a sales and marketing perspective, what are the habits that we, should be promoting to our members? And we have an onboarding journey which we've spent a good 18 months on finessing. But if you think about it, when someone hits buy, then what is it then? What happens after that? It's the perfect opportunity to then onboard them into your products. And what you encourage them to do within your onboarding experience, we felt was important that's led by some good kind of data analysis and data insight, which the Habit Project provided to us.
So you started to touch on some of the questions in the Q&A in the chat, Carl. I think we're probably going to have to pick them out later, but actually I think I heard that you're saying it's understanding where people are in the journey, the service and communication treatments you can deliver them, and the product features and benefits. Am I summarizing there are different stages of the journey, different intervention types, and that's across product and delivery?
Yeah, I would summarize it by saying that the first 30 days and are the most important in a new subscriber's life cycle. Day 0 is the most important, and understanding what is it about your products within the features within your products that are going to be features that keep bringing people back day after day after day. Understanding what those things are is really important. So in order to help inform sales, marketing, products, to focus to inform those departments on what should they be focusing on when they're thinking about engaging members.
So moving on to how we do this, Matt. The world of journalism and news delivery has historically been divided into two very discrete functions, often described as church and state. We live in a very different world. How do we do this now? Carl said it was a team sport earlier, enterprise-wide, but what are the challenges? How do we organise ourselves?
Well, I mean, you've got to be lucky with the people you work with. And at Archant, I've got a commercial partner called Lorna Willis, who, she often says that her commercial strategy is following in the wake of my content strategy. But I actually think, and I correct her and I say, I think it's actually the same strategy. It's just that it's two sides of a different coin. It's the same. It's a strategy that is grounded in having a supremacy and a primacy in a given community, and then the value to our retail partners in reaching that community in a very smart way is exponentially greater than the dumb value we get for third-party data. Even the decline of programmatic advertising, I think, is helping drive the clarity around this, that really it's first-party data that we need to associate our advertisers with. And the only way to get first-party data is to produce content and a product that is attractive enough for people to volunteer it. I don't think kidding people, this is where your strategy has to, I think, affect all the departments. I once met a very brilliant woman called Katie Vanek Smith, who told me something. You know her, Nick.
Might be married to her, yeah.
But I remember about 10 years ago sitting down with her in the Times offices, and she was talking about, once you decide that subscriptions is the business model, everything has to revolve around that. So you stop worrying about spikes in retail sale, and you stop worrying about social media performance and all of that. What you worry about is, what did it do for subscriptions? And everybody has to get their head around that and subscribe to it. Now, I'm not a great believer in hearts and minds. This kind of, if you can get people to understand where you're going and the problems, then they'll come with you. I think getting people to understand and intellectualize where we are and where we need to be is essential. But I know damn well, because I've seen it in every newsroom I've ever been in, that unless you structuralize those changes into their work habits, their technologies, the metrics that they look at, and discard old metrics and praise only the good behaviors that you desire. Yeah. So, you know, stop talking about getting a great 3% uplift in the newspaper sale that day, but celebrate wildly the person who gets 250,000 page views on an opinion piece. That is the kind of cultural change that has to take place. But you do need to have a lucky, if you on either side, if you've got an editor who really is only bothered about the scoop and has a very fixed idea about what the scoop is and couldn't care less about what the subscription success was, then you're never going to optimize your performance. And likewise, if you've got a commercial director who buys in intellectually, but at the end of the day will go and peddle advertising features all day long and fill a newspaper full of cheap garbage that the reader knows is bullshit, but is sold at a high premium, again, you're never going to get there. So you do need commercial, marketing, and content together. But of those three, I think it's what we would call the old marketing function that everything has to revolve around. They need to hold the knowledge and inform the activities of the other departments.
Excellent, and thanks for the name check of my esteemed other half. I think we should go to some of the questions, and actually it starts with the question from Amy, which perhaps Carl you can pick up. You know, we've started talking about structure and actually how you would create a will within an organisation, but one can only do this surely if your design and build partners are aligned to the customer value or audience value strategy that you're engaging in. Amy's question is, would you give some specific examples of what structure should look like for a subscription business? Perhaps we can start there, Carl.
Yeah, I can start there. So yeah, within sales and marketing, I think I referenced before the kind of membership bow tie, and how we almost segment the customer journey. And really, the thinking there was that I kind of wanted expertise in each area of the customer journey. So we have experts within audience development and marketing who's got a very clear job, and their job is to find new audiences. They become the oxygen to our sales funnel. We then have an acquisition team, and the acquisition team are responsible for the prices, the propositions, and the packs that we sell, as well as then managing, you know, the acquisition budget to bring customers in at an effective, you know, CPA, cost per acquisition, or cost per order. We then have a engagement team. The engagement team are in charge of onboarding, which kind of what I've referenced before, and in life, so customers that have passed through the point of trial. And then we have a saves and retention team who are responsible for reactive churn management, and how we turn our kind of saves function into a sophisticated commercial entity. So they're the kind of core tenets of the team. So again, audience development, acquisition, engagement, and retention. But then we have support functions that feed into those different parts of the customer journey. The first one, which I would say is probably made is one of the biggest differences within the team, is embedding data analytics and data science into the business. I can't say how powerful that has been. We've got that now to a point where, you know, they're answering questions that we didn't know we had, as opposed to the more traditional way of, I guess, working with the data team, where, you know, you fire them a question for a piece of data and they give you the answer, right? So that's been really powerful. I think the other core tenet that supports across the bow tie is experimentation and optimization. You know, that to me is it's really important to create an experimentation mindset. I always say to my team that, you know, we need to live in a world where we work on the assumption that we know, and if we think we know, then that we should probably run an experiment to ensure that we know. You know, that sounds like it's total science and no art. I mean, there has to be art and science, right? Because the art is what brings life to experimentation and creativity. But experimentation has been really important for us. And then the final area is around our media buying and planning. I think for a news organization, having that function within the actual team who are accountable for driving the commercial outputs is also important, and that's something that we kind of moved in-house a couple of years ago now. So that's basically the core membership team which I run, and that's how we're structured.
So just a supplementary question perhaps to you, Matt. So who makes the decision about product? Is it editorial, or is it the commercial functions, or is it a collective thing?
It's genuinely collective. I mean, like I said, to re-emphasize, I think as you get a bit older, you start to understand what size of organization suits you. And Archins it's not a small organization, but nor is it a big one. And I like to think about it as an organization that's big enough to do stuff, but small enough to do stuff also.
Yeah. And
I have a very small, I've got a direct route to the chief executive. There's 5 of us on the executive board. I'm very aligned with my commercial director. So it's give and take. And we both, my commercial director looks to me to say, okay, how do we really understand these people, and how do we drive those habits, and how do we, what is the pace of change that we can engender in the newsroom? And I look to the commercial director to say, can you really get the money out of those people if we do all this? And as long as the answer is yes on both, then that's where the investment goes. We've just invested a lot of money in a new CMS that allows active contributions from the community, all differentiated and all of this business, but literally allows the community a public-facing version of the CMS. Now, that I think is a radical step forward into becoming the fabric of the community. But it was a move that was sanctioned by myself and by the commercial director, because we both believe, for a number of business reasons, that that's an absolute prerequisite if we're going to thrive in this new age.
You've just done another brilliant segue into a fantastic question from Maggie. And this is going to be to both of you. You've started it off, Matt, so you can start with a response to this. But the question from Maggie is, are you concerned about the shift from truth, information-centric news provision, to customer or reader-centric? You've just said it's a key tenet of what you're doing. Tell me what you think of that. What's the challenge there?
It's a hugely important question, and it's obviously something that we think very hard about, and it's the most contentious element of this strategy amongst our journalists, is the risk that agendas can be sown on our platforms that are misleading or gaming what we're doing. And I don't look at it like that. I think it's our job, it's always the journalist's job to be as best we can, the arbiter of what the truth is. And you've got to build in the elasticity of what truth is, but it's our job to be the guardians of the truth. But it's also, I think, especially in local media, and this may be very different to Carl's situation, but in local media, I do believe that we shouldn't seek to emulate pure objectivity around the geographies we're serving. I don't think that's our job. I think it's our job to be the biggest cheerleaders of our communities. And when we write positive stories about our communities, and I'm not talking about nice news and all of that stuff, but I'm saying, rather than just reporting on the number of deaths from COVID-19, when you report about the number of people leaving hospital, and you talk to those people and you write about the good experiences, people appreciate it very much. You don't run your community down, but you take a constructive approach to improving the community. And I think that does require a little flexibility and agility of thought sometimes around where are we in the strict, pure factual nature of this thing developing. I do think we have to bring a constructive view to what's happening in the community and be the facilitators of change.
Fantastic. Carl, you're in a different situation, in a different world. How would you respond to that shift, or do you not see the shift?
I could see how you get to that question. I don't think it's something that we experience as an issue internally. Just a good example. The campaign that we're running at the minute is basically all about bringing people the facts. Like that couldn't be more aligned to our journalism, right? Which is designed to go through the most vigorous fact checking through ethics and through standards to ensure that we are providing the facts to the world, and that's something that we jump on and think is a powerful marketing message. And it seems to be resonating at the minute, right? I think through COVID, I think factual, good quality factual journalism was, there was a demand for it, and we certainly lent into that. So we take the newsroom's lead in that sense, but I think that we are aligned, that there is a line, and data is designed to inform, not to dictate. And that's kind of how we operate.
Very good, Matt.
I just wanted to add something, which obviously there'll be people from the United States listening to this who will recoil with horror about me talking about allowing opinion to help form the news agenda, because I think it's important to say that in the UK we don't have this tradition of complete separation between news and opinion. They coexist and they complement each other, and they are oftentimes, in all segments of the media in the UK, probably with the only exception of the BBC, they are used to affirm an agenda that begins with the editor, and it is subjective. So it's a slightly different culture in the UK in terms of what the newsroom looks like, and regards that total separation of, here's the facts, folks, and here's what you should think about, folks.
So I'm going to move on a little bit. This is I could do this for hours. It's not just fascinating, but actually we've got an audience here who came wanting to get some top tips. So rather than some of the more conceptual but really important questions, we at Manifesto are lucky enough to be putting this series together with Pugpig and Piano, who are our partners in this collective, to try and give people a sense of what really matters in the execution of subscription businesses, and particularly in media. Thinking about product, thinking about the application of data, do you have a top 3 of must-dos that you think you've learned that we should share with our audience today? Perhaps, Carl, can you do that off the top of your head?
Good question. I would say I'll probably reiterate what I said around having a North Star. I think it's important for it's a team sport, so don't think you can solve it by just having an effective sales and marketing department. 2, have a North Star, have an engagement metric that is a North Star that you are all aligned to across the 3 different parts of the business. And when you think about where you should put your efforts from an engagement perspective, if I had to choose, and I didn't have capacity to do everything, I would say focus on day 0 and the first few days of a new member's life cycle. That's where you will drive, I think, the biggest impact within an effective engagement program.
I can have a go.
Matt, thank you, Carl. Matt, what do you think?
So from my perspective, I think real contact with your audience is very important, especially as print circulations decline. I think for the audience's point of view, there has to be some place where they come together, and literally meet and are able to commune, genuinely as a community. So that leads you into events. Open news conferences are Project Neon guys in Peterborough before COVID-19 knocked this on the head spent the first half hour of their mornings up and down the high street, literally vox popping people, asking them what is your view on this, what's on your mind, trying to get genuine audience insight. Because I think that in many newsrooms, journalism's become a desk job, which strikes me as absurd. I'm a very keen proponent of the idea of being in and visible within the community. So if it was down to me, I wouldn't have offices anywhere. I would have journalists filing content from cafes and pubs. It's really be there, be seen, be accessible. So that's one. I think pay a lot of attention to pricing, and I think appreciate that if you nail the proposition, it's much more elastic than you would give it credit for. There is much more scope, I think, to generate more revenue than you would initially perhaps dream to ask for. And evidence of that was, funnily enough, a print product, the New European, which you mentioned earlier, which I launched. Now, the New European was launched on the first day of a vote that shocked the entire country, and you had this huge constituency, the 48% that had just been created, and they were angry and pissed off and passionate, all about the same thing. Now that's almost unheralded in terms of potential opportunity for a new brand. But we, with the guys who were quick enough, we did it in 9 days. We launched this newspaper in 9 days. And there was a big debate in the business about the price point. There was a big argument it should be 50 pence so that we get a big scale. I was very keen that it should be more expensive because I genuinely didn't think that price was the thing that was going to make this thing fly. And we ended up charging £2. We now charge £2.50. I wish we'd started off charging a £5. I honestly don't think it would have affected the sale by one. I think people are just glad that we're there. And in fact, I often get people who are subscribers and say, do you know what, I haven't read it for weeks because I haven't got the time, but I'm so glad it pops in through the letterbox. It makes me feel that the fight is still there. Now, if you can get that emotion where people aren't buying your product, but they're just glad that you exist, you've nailed it, but not necessarily easy. And the other thing, just to build on something Carl said earlier about having data within the business, I think one thing we've done at Archie, we've got a data guy in the newsroom, but he's got stripes as well. He has authority. He's not just there to inform, he's there to help direct. And I think to start thinking of the data scientists and the audience insight people as journalists helping make your work more efficient, then that really is a message that's got to get through to traditional journalists, if you like.
I'm going to just pick up on one last question, and we're going to have to do it really quickly, and then we need to get into wrap up. I can't believe we've got through a whole conversation about building a subscription business in media, and I don't think I've heard the word paywall once. And if I missed it because I was concentrating on other things, then forgive me. But paywall always struck me as a horribly negative way of describing access to something that was valuable. Why would you have a wall? Just give me a quick sentence of how you two feel about the whole issue of paywalls.
Shall I go first? I mean, I think it's ridiculous, right? I think, like I said earlier, if people care enough, then they'll willingly pay. If you go and buy a bottle of wine in a supermarket, you don't consider the checkout till to be a paywall. It's the place you exchange for the value you're getting. I think traditionally we have diminished and eroded the value that the public has for our products by giving stuff away and having low price points. But yeah, you've got to be able to really nail that habit that Carl was talking about earlier, and people see it as an essential part of their lives, and they will happily pay.
Carl.
Nick, I would say a wall sounds one-dimensional, and paywall should be multi-dimensional. And I think I've done a lot of work in dynamic paywalls over the years, and I think that the industry is probably starting to see now that thinking about audience as segments of audience, each at different places in the buying journey, and how you can adapt your paywall strategy to cater for for the different the different phases people are in within that buying journey is important. So yeah, walls are one-dimensional. I think dynamism and dynamic is probably a more appropriate way of thinking about a wall.
Very good, thank you. So I'm going to fail miserably to do a proper sum up of some of the messages we've heard. I will miss stuff, and I'm sorry we've not been able to answer everybody's questions, and we haven't really explored the acceleration of the imperative as a result of COVID, but I think that's all apparent to all of us as readers, audiences, consumers want to engage directly with businesses. It's changing the dynamics of many markets, including the media vertical. But for me, there are three things. One is it's a strategic choice. What we've been talking about is a choice that businesses make, and getting aligned around a North Star across a team, back and front office, multifunctionally, and through the customer's journey is a strategic choice. The second thing is this creating habits. I love the habit loop, but actually engagement is a lifetime game for a reader, for your audience, and managing beyond the point of purchase across the life cycle of a reader, and identifying how you can optimize the value exchange is what you've both been talking about. The last thing for me, and we didn't explore it much, but we kept on touching on it, was the alignment around capabilities, and particularly data. The critical point of having known customer data, first-party data, as an engine for the business that can create both commercial revenues and reader revenues, but also inform content and how you serve content. So those are my three things. I hope I've done you justice. You've been brilliant. I could go on for a good time yet. The audience has been great too. It's lovely to see some familiar names, and thank you for your questions. In the last couple of minutes, can I hand back to you, Jazz, who I hope we'll talk about in the next one in our series as well, where we have the BBC and Tortoise, I believe, attending.
Thanks very much, Nick, Matt and Carl. That was really great. And the other one thing I'd add to Nick's three is just another thing, echo all of those that stood out for me. It was around experimentation and optimization being key, and actually doing it through the data within your business, yes, but also going out to your communities and ecosystem through stuff like Project Neon and the Habit Loop project is crucial to keeping this as an ongoing thing, an ongoing evolution of the industry and subscriptions. So thank you so much for your time. That is the end of our second masterclass. We do, of course, have more coming up in the series. We will be sharing the slides from this masterclass in a follow-up email, and the video will go up on the website tomorrow. In the same way we did last time, we'll also be sending up a follow-up email with feedback. You will have noticed we made some changes to this masterclass. If you do have 2 minutes to fill out that feedback form, it really does help us to iterate the experience for you and make sure that we are making this as interactive and engaging for you all. And we'll also be sharing a thought piece from Manifesto about engagement in times of COVID. So we might not have covered that entirely in the conversation today, but there'll be a nice little thought piece going around that hopefully will engage you to interact with us some more through the website, through Twitter. Email us if you like. And then, as Nick mentioned, our next webinar is same time next week. It'll be hosted by Johnny from PugPig, and it's focused on how to design super engaging digital products with panel guests from Tortoise and the BBC, which I hope you will all join in. So thank you so much again to Matt, Carl and Nick.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers.